Welcome to Health Professional Radio. I'm your host, Neil Howard. Thank you so much for returning. Speaking of returning, we're going to have a conversation with returning guest Daniel Simon, Senior Vice President at BioPharma Business Development at Guardant Health. He's returning to talk about a collaboration with Radius Health. Welcome back to the program, Daniel.
Thank you, Neil. It's good to be back.
Right. Well, for our listeners who may not be familiar with you, when you were here with us before, give us a bit of background about yourself and talk about your role there at Guardant.
Of course. Neil, I lead the BioPharma Business Group within Guardant Health. Guardant Health is a leading precision oncology company whose mission is to help conquer cancer with data. And Guardant has developed this wonderful technology called liquid biopsy, whereby we take a blood draw from cancer patients and we isolate and sequence the DNA in the patient's blood to help understand which mutations they have, and thus hopefully help guide therapy selection for their treatment, because ultimately cancer is a disease of the genome. Underlying mutations results in uncontrolled cell division. And so Guardant's technology allows physicians to order a simple blood draw for their patients within 7 days, get a result back as to which alterations the patient may have and therefore which therapies may work for them. And in addition to the clinical side of our business, where at this point more than 7,000 oncologists have ordered more than 120,000 tests for their patients, we work with over 50 different biopharmaceutical companies, supporting them accelerate the development of their investigational therapies. Now, there's a number of things that we can do. We can help them find the right patients for their clinical trials. We can partner on companion diagnostics, which is what we'll be talking about in a moment. And we can do all sorts of interesting analysis on serial samples if they're taken from patients who are put on a new drug. Imagine comparing at baseline to how patients are doing over the course of therapy. And we can actually see within just a couple of weeks if a patient's responding to a therapy or not. We can understand how the tumor's evolving and the resistance markers that are cropping up. And in turn, all of this data could be aggregated and used to help develop new drugs as well down the road.
Now, you mentioned the collaborations with other pharmaceutical companies exploring the use of your Guardant360 CDx. Is that correct? Now, this recent collaboration with Radius Health, how is it significant?
We were super excited to announce this collaboration with Radius Health recently. The significance of this collaboration is that this is our first partnership in the indication for breast cancer, for which there remains significant unmet need for many patient subpopulations. Previously, we have announced collaborations with AstraZeneca for their EGFR inhibitor Tagrisso, with Amgen for their KRAS G12C inhibitor, now called sotorasib, and at the beginning of July, we announced a collaboration with Janssen for amivantamab, their EGFR MET bispecific antibody. All of those are in the indication of non-small cell lung cancer, where currently the guidelines recommend that patients are tested for at least 10 different biomarkers. And so that's the poster child for the importance of comprehensive genomic profiling. But it's not only in lung cancer that what we call CGP is recommended. It's increasingly recommended across many more indications as we better understand the underlying molecular drivers of these cancers. And breast cancer is one of those. In fact, breast cancer was, in many ways, the original targeted therapy indication, with the approval of inhibitors for patients with amplifications in the HER2 gene. I think many listeners may have heard of the drug Herceptin, originally developed by Genentech, which has been a literal lifesaver for many people with breast cancer. And over the years, the indication has evolved further. There are actionable mutations in the PIK3CA gene, in the genes BRCA1 and 2, which a lot of people are aware of from their role, their significant role in hereditary breast cancer, as well as other cancers such as ovarian cancer. And as our understanding of the disease continues to evolve, Radius's drug, elacestrant, is a new wave of drugs called selective estrogen receptor degraders, or SERDs. Now, there have been SERDs on the market for quite some time, but what Radius Health is exploring using the Guardant technology is whether patients with certain mutations in their ESR1 gene, which is the gene that encodes the estrogen receptor, in fact do better on the newest version of, on the drug that they're developing, which is a newer version of traditional SERDs. And so we're really excited to be helping them with this. There are challenges with traditional tissue biopsies in many different indications. In lung cancer, it's often hard to successfully get tissue from the tumors in patients' lungs. Up to 40% of lung biopsies will fail. There are challenges as well in breast cancer. It's clearly easy to access tissue within the breast. But for many of these patients, when their initial therapies start to fail and the tumors become resistant, the tumors will often spread. And one of the common sites of spread for these patients who become resistant with breast cancer is the bone. And so these patients develop these incredibly painful metastases in their bones. And if you think about the idea of trying to stick a needle into someone's bone to pull out some tissue that's within the bone, I think you get a sense of how painful that might be.
Yes, yes.
And so Guardant's technology allows us to look at the genomic alterations that have evolved within these cancers without having to go through a bone metastasis biopsy, which can often be very challenging for the aforementioned reasons.
When do you anticipate FDA approval, and what might that approval mean for pharmaceutical companies that are working in this targeted area?
I think about that question in two parts, Neil. We submitted our first PMA towards the end of last year for our partnership with AstraZeneca for the EGFR inhibitor Tagrisso. And we hope to have approval soon. There are a number of benefits of FDA approval, and we believe that approval will accelerate the wider adoption of guideline-recommended genomic profiling, because today many patients are not fully profiled in line with the guidelines. And this will obviously increase the number of advanced cancer patients who receive potentially life-changing treatments. And so we think specifically about what do we believe FDA approval could do. It'll strengthen reimbursement, hopefully helping advance conversations with some private payers and further improving our existing Medicare coverage. It will hopefully encourage other biopharmaceutical companies to sign up with us and partner to help get their drugs to market as well. We'll have at some point shown we can do this once, and hopefully we'll do it many more times. And over the medium to long term, we're excited that the stamp of FDA approval will help further convince physicians to use Guardant360 to treat their patients who maybe historically have been a little bit slow to adopt comprehensive genomic profiling. Going back to the lung cancer example, and the recommendation to test for 10 different genomic biomarkers, it's thought that less than 20% of oncologists actually test their patients across all of those biomarkers, and the number may be as low as 8%. Now, specifically, Neil, with the Radius Health example, their study is still underway, and once that's completed and the patients have been on the drug for a sufficiently long time, the data will hopefully be submitted to the FDA for review and eventual approval. This is, of course, a never sure thing. As many of your listeners know, drug approval is a risky business.
Yes, yes.
But we then hope to see further benefits for breast cancer patients as well, including expanded access and greater use of comprehensive genomic profiling.
Daniel, where can we go online and get some more information about Guardant Health and possibly some more information about Guardant360 CDx in this Radius Health Emerald study?
I would point your listeners towards the Guardant Health website, where they'll find more information about our late-stage cancer assay, Guardant360. And in the investor section is the Radius Health press release. Of course, there's lots more information, about elacestrant on the Radius Health website. And I hope that soon there will be news about the FDA approval.
Simon, always a pleasure talking with you. Thank you so much for coming back to Health Professional Radio this morning.
Neil, thank you again for having me.
You've been listening to Health Professional Radio. I'm your host, Neil Howard, in conversation with returning guest, Mr. Daniel Simon, SVP at BioPharma Business Development at Guardant Health. Audio copies of this program are available at hpr.fm and healthprofessionalradio.com.au. You can also subscribe to the podcast on iTunes. Listen in, download at SoundCloud, and be sure and subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/Health Professional Radio.